Hello guys, buenos dias, buenas tardes, or buenas noches. Welcome to yet another of our Spanish 101 videos. This one is sort of a continuation of the two previous ones. I hope you recall that the two previous ones deal with regular are verbs, and I told you that those were one of the three big groups of regular verbs that exist in the Spanish language. So in this video, we are going to cover the other two, verbos regulares and er y en ir, or in English, er and ir, regular verbs, okay? First, I'm going to remind you very quickly of the method we studied for conjugating are verbs, okay? The first step is, of course, getting rid of the last two letters of the infinitive. And I hope you remember that the infinitive is that form of the verb in which no one is doing the action, which in Spanish ends with R, right? In this case, AR. Trabajar. Trabajar is an ar verb which means to work. And that is the infinitive. So if we apply the first step, we get rid of the A, we get rid of the R, and then we are left with trabaj, which is known as the stem of the verb. So that's the first step. The second step is adding the ar endings to the stem. Of course, in order to complete this step, we need to know the ar endings, which are right here. O, as, a, amos, an, right? So when we add those endings, the result is the conjugation of trabajar for all possible subjects. Yo trabajo, tú trabajas, él trabaja, ella trabaja, nosotros trabajamos, ustedes trabajan, ellos trabajan, right? That is just a review of something we knew already, how to conjugate are verbs. Okay? Luckily, the conjugation of both er and ir verbs is extremely similar. Let us look, for example, at the conjugation of er verbs. The first step is the same one, getting rid of the last two letters of the infinitive. Since these are er verbs, they're going to end in er, not ar. For example, comer. Comer is a regular er verb that means to eat. So the first step is getting rid of the last two letters. We get rid of the E, we get rid of the R, and we're left with com. That is our stem, right? And then the second step here is where it differs from the adverbs. Of course, we don't add the adverbs, we add the er. Sorry, not the ar endings, we add the er endings, right? And these are different from the ar endings. I hope you remember by this point that the ar endings are a, as, a, amos, an. Well, the er endings are very similar, but you change the vowel, right? Instead of an A, it is an E, right? So the er endings are o, es, e, hemos, en. If we complete this step, if we add these er endings to the stem we obtained, we get the conjugation of comer. Yo como, tú comes, él come, ella come, nosotros comemos, ustedes comen, ellos comen. It is very important that you remember that each of these three regular verb groups, are verbs, er verbs, and ir verbs, each group has its own endings. Because the thing is, if you add the wrong endings, you're creating a very different form of the verb, okay? So Spanish speakers are not going to understand what you're saying. They will understand that you are using a verb that means to eat, for example, in this case, but they will not understand how you are using it, right? You need to add the correct endings. So the er endings are os, hemos, en, right? And as I said, if you compare them to the add endings, you will see they're exactly the same, except for whenever you had an a in the add endings, you change it for an e in the er endings. Okay? Now let us conjugate a regular verb from the third group, from the ir group. The procedure is the same, right? You're probably getting the hang of this already. First, we need to get rid of the last two letters of the infinitive, and I want to use this verb, which is very important and happens to be a regular ir verb, vivir. It means to live, vivir. So let's get rid of those letters. Let's get rid of that I and of that R, and we are left with viv, which is our stem, right? And then, of course, we're not going to add the ar or the e endings. We're going to add the ir endings, which go like this: os, imos, en. If we add those endings, we get the conjugation of vivir. Yo vivo, tú vives, él vive, ella vive, nosotros vivimos, ustedes viven, ellos viven. If you compare these endings to the er endings, the one we did just before, you will see that they're exactly the same, except for one, the nosotros ending, which changes an E for an I. Other than that, they're exactly the same as the er endings. So let's look at the endings for each of these groups of verbs together, if you will. Of course, in order to have a successful comparison, we also need to remember this information on the left, right? This is very important. We need to know which ending matches which subject, right? Because otherwise we won't be able to actually use the verbs in sentences. So always remember when you memorize these endings that the first ending is for yo, or I. The second ending is for tú, or you, when you address one person. The third is for both él, he, and ella, she. The fourth ending is for nosotros, we. The fifth ending is for ustedes, you guys. And then the sixth ending is for both ellos and ellas, they, right? When it's feminine and when it's masculine, right? In my experience, for some mysterious reason, English speakers tend to confuse the nosotros and the ustedes endings, right? I guess it has something to do with the way that you is used, the pronoun you is used in English, right? So please pay particular attention to that, but of course you need to learn all of these in order, okay? So this slide right here is very, very important. I recommend you use it for study. So these are the sets of endings that we need to memorize. They are the ones we're going to add to our stem in order to obtain the correct conjugation of these verbs, right? The first one you should know by now, o, as, a, amos, an, because those are the ar endings, right? Let's compare them. This is information I already gave you in the other slides. I talked about it, but I think that if you look at it, it will be clearer than just saying it, right? Look at the second table, the green one, the one with the er endings, and compare it to the red one, to the one with the ar endings. You will notice that visually they're very similar, right? But there's only one change. Whenever you find an a in the ar endings, you're changing it for an e in the er endings, right? Moreover, you will notice that you're changing the a that you find in the infinitive ending, ar, for an a that you find in the other infinitive ending, er, right? So I think this should help you learn this, right? You don't actually need to memorize a whole new set of endings. You just need to memorize the fact that you change those A's for E's if it's an er verb, Okay? And then, of course, you have the ir endings. Compare that last table, the blue one, with the one in the middle, with the green one. And you will notice very quickly that it's almost the same except for one form, the nosotros form, right? That one for ir endings has an I instead of an E. That is the only change. So if you want to, in order to memorize these, you can memorize them independently as 3 sets of endings. That's perfectly fine. Personally, I think it's easier to learn the ar endings and then to learn the ways in which the other 2 sets of endings differ from the ar endings. To learn that the er endings are the same but with an E instead of an A. And to learn that the ir endings are the same as the er endings, but with an I instead of an E for the nosotros. Right? Personally, I think that's less information to memorize. But whatever strategy you prefer, please memorize these because conjugating regular verbs is a very, very important topic for Spanish 101. ¿Ok? Muchas gracias, muchachos. Hasta luego.